Hello dear students, my name is Masood Pervaiz. I am Senior Lecturer for the paper Audit and Assurance at Synergic Training Abu Dhabi. So I welcome you all to this very exciting and important session on ensuring exam success for the paper Audit and Assurance. So let's look at the agenda. I've divided my presentation into different areas. Like first of all, I will be discussing the real issues faced by the students of Audit and Assurance. Then I will be discussing the fact that how to build the knowledge base. I think all of you understand that knowledge base is one of the key factor of this particular paper. So how to build it and how important it is to have a good knowledge base. Then we will be discussing on the application part. So majority of your paper is application of that particular knowledge. You are given with different scenarios and you have to apply that knowledge on those scenarios. So how to be perfect or how to be good at application of the knowledge. One very important factor which I have noticed that students do not have the required level of professional skepticism, which is one of the key requirements for this paper Audit and Assurance. And now we will be discussing that how to build that professional skepticism and how important it is. Then I will be moving to more technical areas. I have selected 3 technical areas which are very important from your exam perspective. I will be discussing about risks, that how to attempt this particular question of risk. Then audit procedures. Definitely I will be focusing more on substantive procedures and the common mistakes made by students and how to get over it. Then I will be discussing about test of controls as well. And the third area which I have selected is your MTQs. At the end, I will be discussing few techniques that how to win the marker. So how you are going to facilitate your marker. And that is the key factor as well. So let's start with the real issues which I have identified in my teaching career. And I want to discuss with you guys, and we have to deal with these issues as well. I have seen that students do not have the required appetite level for studies. I'm not saying you guys do not study at all, but the required level of appetite, you are feeling happy, the feel good factor when you are studying, you are feeling overwhelmed when you are studying. I think this is the key to success. So if you are feeling burdened, if you are not happy while you are studying, and if you are of the view that you get stuck somewhere, so definitely it is going to affect your morale and it is going to affect your performance as well. So my first observation and my first message to students is you have to build your appetite. Either you have to look at your study routine, you have to use some pages, you have to develop some notes, you have to develop some PowerPoint presentations, you have to have some what you can say summarize pointers. You have to do something to make your learning experience very overwhelming. I used to have colored pages when I study. I use colored pages. I use PowerPoint slides. I used to teach at the very early age. So my first message is that you have to take care of this particular factor, that you have to build the appetite and you have to have a good feel good factor. The second important thing is, which is your inherent limitation in many cases for this particular paper, is lack of practical experience. Majority students are not working in audit firms. They are not going for audits. They are not practically conducting the audit work. So I think this is one of the important factor which plays an important role in your passing and failing. I'm not saying that it is mandatory to work in audit firms, but it is recommended. And even if you are not working, you should identify that this is your inherent weakness or limitation and you have to work on it, or you have to have an extra practice to overcome this particular issue. The third thing is the fact that students are not going for the kill. They are just attempting the paper. They are not ensuring success. Like many students fail at 48, 49, 47, 46 is an excellent example that they are just attempting, they are not ensuring their success. So you have to have a proper scope when you have to ensure your success. When I use the word scope, so you should identify that I have to take classes, I have to prepare material from the books, from the revision kits, from past papers. You need to have a defined scope, and you have to make sure that you pass. So making sure needs some extra effort. This is again a very journal feedback. Whenever we tutors sit and discuss, and we take feedback from students as well, and when we discuss in our close group focus discussions, that students do not pay full respect to the MTQs. When I say full respect, normally you guys are of the view that you can handle MTQs even if you are not having the required knowledge. Because if you are given with options, so you will be in a position to identify the correct answer. But you know, MTQs are very tricky. They are very excellently designed. So this is again very, very important factor, that you should respect MTQs and you should fight for each and every mark in that MCQ, and you should try to have maximum marks in this particular area. Again, another observation for this particular paper, Audit and Assurance, is that students do not pay respect, or they are not very well prepared for the minors areas, like internal audit is an area. You can say there are a few things with respect to corporate governance. So I fully understand that you focus more on audit procedure, you focus more on risk, you guys focus more on the 500 series documents, but still I think there are other areas which are in your syllabus and they need to be well prepared. Another observation is, rather it's a fact, that students of paper Audit and Assurance, they struggle because they are unable to complete the paper because of poor typing speed. If you look at your other papers in this particular portion of your ACCA journey, like if you look at performance management, it's a numerical plus theory. If you look at tax, if you look at financial management, so you got a lot of facilitation when you are dealing with a paper which is numerical based. Because in numerical, your typing speed does not matter a lot. But if you are dealing with a theory paper, which is a technical paper as well, so and on the top of it, you do not have the required typing speed, definitely it is going to affect your chances of passing the exam. So these are very few points which I believe are very important to discuss with you guys. You have to take care of all these factors. You have to work on these factors, and this will definitely increase your chances of passing the exam. Now let's move to the more technical areas. The first thing which I need to discuss in detail is building the knowledge base. You know, building the appropriate knowledge base is the key to success. This is the most important thing. You should realize the fact that this is the first time you guys are studying audit. You haven't studied audit earlier in your ACCA journey, which is not the case in case of financial accounting or in case of management accounting. So already you have some basis. So first of all, realize the fact that you are studying auditing for the first time. And secondly, only memorizing will not work. How come a person can memorize something without understanding? Now, if you just take an example of definition of audit risk, and I think you guys are well aware of the fact that audit risk is the risk that auditor will give an inappropriate opinion when financial statements are materially misstated. Now, there are chances that you memorize this particular statement or this particular sentence, but if you do not understand what is written, so there are huge chances that you are not able to reproduce it in your exam. So my strong recommendation is concentrate quite very hard in developing your knowledge base. Now let's look at the example of, say for instance, sampling risk. Now I think all of you know that sampling risk is the risk that the sample might not be the true representative of the population. So again, you have to understand what is sampling risk. You have to understand what is non-sampling risk. you have to understand what is performance materiality. I have seen many students, they do not try to understand what is performance materiality, rather they try to memorize it. So it's very tough only to memorize things. So my clear message to all the students is, first of all, you have to concentrate on building the knowledge base. And building a knowledge base does not mean that you try only to memorize things. You have to understand, and then you are supposed to memorize. So it's very easy to memorize if you have a clear understanding. So, say for instance, if we are talking about contents of engagement letter, so I think these contents are quite very logical in their flow. Like we talk about objective of the audit should be there in the engagement letter, scope of the audit should be there, management responsibility should be there, or the type and form of report which you are going to issue should be there, planning considerations should be there, fee calculation basis should be there. So my message is that work on your knowledge base. Majority students do not have the required knowledge base. So if you do not have the required knowledge base, how come it is possible to pass that particular exam? So focus on your knowledge base. So the best way to build knowledge base is you have to understand, you have to memorize, and you have to recall, and you have to write on a regular basis. Like one fine morning, you just pull out a white page and just list down the contents of engagement letter, or you just list down the contents of permanent audit file. Okay. Or what you can say, you try to write what is sampling risk, what is, like I mentioned earlier. So this is my first recommendation to all of you, to build a strong knowledge base. Listen to your tutor carefully, try to read the book carefully, and try to understand, memorize, recall, and write on daily basis. The next very important factor is application of knowledge. I think every one of you knows that the fact that application is one of the important area, and it's a tricky part as well. Say for instance, there's a question, knowledge base, list down contents of engagement letter. Apparently it's an easy question, like you just write down the contents of engagement letter. But if I give you an engagement letter with certain issues in that, something missing or something which is not up to the mark, and I said, can you critically evaluate or identify any deficiencies in this? So this is a application based question. So as you know that majority of the questions are application based, so you need to focus on that. So how to be good at this application of knowledge? So the only way to be good at application of knowledge is to give yourself different situations again and again, and I think you are given with lots of resources available. So the only way to be good at application is to attempt more questions, is to go through different exam kits. If you go through your past exam papers, and you just need to have extensive practice. So there is no shortcut to building this particular skills of application of knowledge. So first of all, you have to build the knowledge base. I have already overemphasized on that. And then the application part, and the best way to focus on the application is to give you ample time to attempt as many questions as possible. Now, this is again a very common observation that students do not have the required professional skepticism. They do not have that critical mind. They do not have that questioning mind. Like if you are given with a question of analytical procedures and you are asked to analytically analyze different ratios, say for instance, or different data. So students are unable to critically evaluate, or they do not have that questioning mind. And I fairly understand if you do not, if you are not working in the audit firm, if you do not have the required exposure, so it's quite difficult to build that skepticism which is required from an auditor. But if you're not working somewhere, That means it's your limitation, it's your inherent limitation. Then you have to deal with it by practicing more questions again and again, and giving yourself different situations, giving yourself like, just for example, if I give you electricity bills of manufacturing organization of the last 12 months, and I said, kindly critically evaluate those electricity bills. So an ordinary person is going to check the rates applicable in those electricity bills, or the month relevant, or the meter number, or the calculation of taxes. Okay, so this is an ordinary aspect of evaluating those electricity bills. But if you look at a critical person who is having a level of skepticism, questioning mind, so what that guy is going to do is to compare the electricity consumption is going to be compared with production. So you are going to compare the number of unit consumed or electricity consumed with the number of unit produced. So if electricity is consumed on the higher side, but the accounts or the data or the financial statements are not reflecting the required level of production in the books of accounts. So I hope you guys can identify that there might be a chances of understatement of sales, and there might be a chances of that you have evaded the VAT and you have evaded the income tax as well, unless or until there are other justifiable reasons for that matter. So my message, or the point I'm going to make here is that if you do not have the required level of professional skepticism, you will not be able to properly attempt this particular paper, because in many areas this particular skill is very much required. If you're dealing with audit procedures, or you are critically evaluating systems, or even in other areas as well, like analytical procedures, in which, or risk assessments as well. You know, in risk assessments as well, if the question is about audit risk or financial statement risks, so you need to have a very skeptical frame of mind to critically evaluate the situation and to link that particular situation with different risks which might be faced in that particular scenario. So if I give you a recap, I'm talking about building a knowledge base. I'm talking about practicing a lot to apply that knowledge base. And my next concern is about having the required level of professional skepticism, which is generally missing because of lack of practical exposure. So I think this is not a big deal if you are not working in some audit firm, but you should identify that this is your weakness, and you have to overcome on this particular weakness by critically evaluating different things, by attempting more questions, by giving yourself certain situations, or even by discussing with your friends that this is the question, what are certain aspects with respect to going concern which we can discuss, what are certain aspects with respect to audit risks which we can discuss, or financial statement risks, or analytical procedures as well, which are mandatory to be applied as risk assessment procedures in accordance with ISA 315 as well. So this is again a very important observation and a very important area which you should be working or focusing on. Now let's move to the more technical areas. Like I said earlier, I have selected 3 technical areas to be discussed in today's session. One is the risk. Second one, I will be discussing more on audit procedures. And the third one is I will be discussing on MTQs. So generally, you guys are asked question about financial statement risk, or the question is about audit risk. And everyone, I think, should have a fair idea that audit risk is a combination of inherent risk into control risk and into detection risk. And inherent and control risk are combinedly called financial statement risks. So if the question is about audit risks, that means I am required to discuss financial statement risk as well, and I can discuss detection risks as well. But if the question is requiring you to identify financial statement risks, definitely I will be focusing more on the financial statement risk area rather than the detection risk. And the third area is about business risks. So business risk is primarily more focused in your advanced audit and assurance. And but even if you are discussing some business risks, the question, if the question is about financial statement risk or the question is about audit risk, and you have identified some business risks, then you have to link that business risks with financial statement risk as well. That, for example, if a company is under litigation, so it's a business risk, and the company is not going to make any provision in the financial statement, so this business risk will be transformed or can be linked with financial statement risks. This is quite very, very important. Now, dealing with risk, definitely you need to read out the scenario which is given in the exam, but I will focus more on the drafting of the answer with respect to this. Say for instance, let give you an example that a company is recognizing revenue when goods are 70% delivered. So you are recognizing revenue when goods are 70% delivered. This is, I'm just giving you an example. So the question is, identify financial statement risks in the above scenario. So how to draft this particular answer so that you get maximum marks out of it. So first of all, the very first thing, you have to identify what is the financial statement risk. So I think the very clear risk in this particular scenario is revenue recognition. So you need to have a heading about it. Then you have to talk about the scenario. Like you have to reproduce the scenario here, that the company A or company B is recognizing revenue when it is 70% delivered. So you have to reproduce the scenario. The third very important factor is you have to discuss that why you think it's an issue, why you think it's a risk. So I think first of all you have to discuss what is going on, and you have to take data from the scenario and you have to reproduce that in your answer. And then you have to explain that why you think it's a risk. This is a very important factor, that why you think it's a particular risk. In that, normally we discuss about the requirements of the standards. Like you are of the view that in accordance with this particular IFRS, revenue is to be recognized when these parameters are present. So normally it is not mandatory to mention the name and number or of that particular accounting standard. But if you look at the past examiners specimen answers, so normally for your reference purposes, the name and the number is mentioned in the specimen answer. So if you are referring to the name then or number, then you have to have a complete name of that document, which I believe, from if you take my point of view, so I think I recommend that you should be having that particular capacity and knowledge to refer to a particular document with the number and the name as well. So like I mentioned, that there is a scenario in which organization is wrongly recognizing the revenue. So first of all, you have to identify the risk, then you have to reproduce what is going on, then you have to justify that why you think it's an issue, and normally then you talk about the fourth step is the implications. So you have to discuss about the implications, like if you think, like you said, as the company is recognizing revenue when goods are this much delivered, so we believe that revenue is overstated, and if you can quantify it, that revenue is overstated by this amount, or liabilities are understated by this amount, or whatsoever the implications on the financial statements from the different statements perspective, it's always recommended to discuss those areas in detail. So risk is an important area. So the only way forward discussing with risk is you should go through different questions again and again, and you should be very well versed with the accounting standards which are relevant at this stage. And you should be looking at the fact that the drafting of the answer or the composition of the answer is the key to success. Now, it's very difficult for the marker to cut certain marks if you have identified the risk, first of all, then you have discussed the scenario in detail. This is again very important. Then you have reproduced the requirement of the document, that why you think it's a risk, and then you talk about the implication part, which is again very, very important. Now, say for instance, there is some issue with respect to inventory valuation, which is again a very common area which examiner asks in the question. So first of all, again, you have to give a heading, inventory valuation. You have identified the area. Then you have to discuss the scenario. That's what's going on in the scenario. The company is valuing inventory, whatsoever the case is. Then you have to discuss the requirement of the standard. Like you said, in accordance with IS2, inventory is to be valued at lower of cost and NRV, and whatever the requirements, you should be able to reproduce that requirement. And the fourth part is again the implications. And normally we are talking about financial implications on the financial statements. So you will be able, rather you should be able to discuss about the implications in that particular area. So risk is an important area. I hope you guys understand that drafting of the answer with proper framework is very, very important, and it will increase your chances of passing that particular exam or in scoring good in that particular area. So this is what it is in a very short span of time I can discuss on risk. Now let's move to the next area, which is dealing with audit procedures, like substantive procedure, which is what you can say a pain point for majority of the audit and assurance students. So let's take an example of non-current assets, which is an important area. Now, every one of you should be knowing that we have to verify assertions. Assertions are management claims, and normally assertions are area specific. We have different assertions for classes of transactions, we have different assertions for account balances, and we have different assertions for presentation and disclosures. Now, this is very important to understand that which assertion, now only memorizing audit procedures will not work. Like if you say, sir, if I can memorize audit procedures, will I be able to score good, or will I be able to attempt the question which is a scenario based? So you have to understand the concept, or you have to understand which assertion, because the flow of procedure is very, very important to understand. Like say for instance, if we are talking about non-current assets and we are checking the completeness of non-current assets, so I think the completeness means all non-current assets that should have been recorded, have been recorded or not. Okay, so the flow, all non-current assets that should have been recorded or not. Now let's take an example of two areas. One is physical, your non-current assets, and second one is your books of accounts. Now, when you are checking completeness, you are checking all assets that should have been recorded or not. So your flow of procedures should be from physical to books. You know, your flow of audit procedure, you can write that I will select few assets which are visible at the client premises, and I will verify those assets that they are either being recorded in the books of accounts or not, because for completeness you cannot go other way around. Now, if you have selected few items from your books of accounts and you are physically verifying them, let's take it like this. So this you are addressing existence as an assertion. So if the question is about completeness, so you have to have a very clear frame of mind that what is required to check the completeness and what should be the flow of that particular procedure. Okay, so if you are verifying or you have identified a sample of few transactions recorded in the books of accounts and you are verifying those with the either they are physically present or not, so this you are addressing the existence assertion rather than you are addressing the completeness. For completeness, you are either going from physical to books, or you are verifying maybe a repair and maintenance account. So there is a possibility that there are few repair and maintenance which have been expensed out in that particular period, which should be capitalized. So the point I'm going to make here is that you need to have a clear understanding that which assertion you are addressing. If you're not fully clear about that assertion, so first of all you should understand what is meant by completeness, what is meant by existence, how to check rights and obligations, how to check valuation. Okay, so my strong recommendation is that do not try to memorize procedures. Yes, there are certain mnemonics, there are certain shortcuts being developed by different teachers, which I totally agree with, but you need to develop a strong understanding that what should be the flow of audit procedures. And then you have, while applying substantive procedure, you need to apply your tools quite effectively. Like if you look at the tools available to the auditor, so normally our tools are inquiries, this is one of our tool, then inspection is again one of the tool, then recalculation is again a tool, then re-performance, again this is a tool, then analytical procedures is a tool available, and then confirmation. So you should be very smart in using these tools. Where I have to use these tools, where to recalculate. Like if you talk about valuation assertion for non-current assets, so valuations have different aspects. Like you have to audit cost of assets, you have to audit accumulated depreciation, you have to audit revaluation, and you have to audit impairment as well. Now I think you can use this recalculation while you are auditing the depreciation part, and if you are auditing the cost, so I think you should have a clear understanding that how come I can verify the cost of asset by looking at the invoices, by looking at the minutes of meeting in which that particular cost is being approved. So again, my message is that there is no shortcut of having a grip on substantive procedures. You need to develop your complete mindset, you need to develop your understanding, you need to develop the flow, which assertion, like for the procedures with respect to non-current assets will have an entirely different flow of procedures as compared to if you are verifying existence. One again very important factor, normally students write inquire with management and that's it, this is their procedure. Now you haven't mentioned that inquire for what. Okay, so you have to have a complete procedures, and you should be knowing what you are writing. That if you say inquire with management regarding what, why you are inquiring with management, or you said review minutes of meeting. So this is not a procedure. This is, you are reviewing minutes of meeting, that's fine, but why you are reviewing it, what particular thing you are looking in those particular areas. So substantive procedures, I fully understand this is one of the key area for audit and assurance students, and you guys struggle a lot in that because you try to memorize it. You do not try to understand which assertion I'm going to address, because every procedure is inherently addressing some assertion in the background. Okay, so you should be able to identify that which assertion we are currently talking about. Okay, now if we look at test of controls, normally test of controls, there are 6 systems in your syllabus. Normally test of question is asked on systems, like you are given with a typical system and you are required to identify deficiencies. You are required to discuss about the implications and recommendations. Again, you are giving with a system and you are asked to apply test of controls, or there might be certain knowledge based question in which the question is just list down control objective for sales system, or what are certain control. So if you have any question which is knowledge based, it's a plus. So again, my message is that you should understand system, you should understand the subsystems. Like if you look at the credit sales system, so there are subsystems in that. Like we talk about ordering subsystem, then credit control, then there's the dispatching, then there is invoicing, then there is accounting and recording, and then there is customer follow-up. So first of all, try to absorb a complete system by absorbing the subsystems given in that particular system. Then you have to look into every subsystem in detail, that what can went wrong at the ordering process. Like if you look at sales system, like I just mentioned, so a credit sales system is having certain subsystems, like there is ordering, this is the first subsystem, then there is credit control, which is the next subsystem, then there is dispatching, which is the next subsystem, then there is invoicing, which is again the next one, and then there is accounting and recording. So first of all, you should be able to identify what can went wrong at the ordering subsystem. What are risks of ordering subsystems? What can went wrong? Then you will be able to identify the control objectives, and then you are able to identify the controls. So once you are clear with the subsystems, you are clear with the risks faced by those subsystems, then you are able to identify control. And that's applying test of control is the most simplest part. If you are good at identifying risks, if you are good at identifying what are certain test of controls, so application of or applying test of control is I think is quite simple. Say for instance, if you are, like you said, I have selected few dispatch notes, sample of dispatch notes, and I am verifying those dispatch notes with invoices. So you should have a clear set of mind that why you are doing it, because there is a risk that few dispatches might not be invoiced. So if you are clear about the risk factors faced by different subsystems, so you will be in a position to apply test of controls quite effectively. And you need to build a transaction trail in your mind. Like there is, first of all, there is an ordering, then you go for credit control, then you go for dispatching, then you go for invoicing. So what can went wrong at dispatching? What can went wrong at invoicing? So again, my message to all of you is, first of all, try to understand the system. Try to understand the subsystems. Try to have a good understanding of the risks faced by those subsystems, and then the controls which are being applied, and then how to test them. Testing controls need a careful attention of, you can build the transaction trail, like there is ordering, and like if you look at the sales system, so first of all there is ordering, then there is credit control, then there is dispatching, then there is invoicing, and then there is accounting. So you have to check A with B for this. You have to check B with C for this. So you have to check B with this, but you should be knowing why I am checking this with that. Like if you are verifying few ordering, I have selected few orders and I'm verifying those orders with invoicing. So I should be having a clear mindset that why I'm doing it, because I have to make sure that while invoicing, I have charged the same rate to the customer which I have quoted while taking the orders. So test of controls is again an important area, and you guys have to focus on this particular area as well. Now MTQs, I have already identified that MTQs is an important area. Guesswork will not work. Do not try to have a guesswork. Try to respect MTQs, try to carefully read MTQs. And if some particular option is correct, you should be very clear in your mind that why it is correct. And if something is wrong, you should have a clear understanding that why that option is wrong. So your concern is not only with the correct option when you are practicing or you are going through your study material or your workbooks or your practice material. So you have to focus on options which are wrong, because if you understand carefully that this is wrong, so it will help you in identifying what is right. Then, like I discussed earlier, you have to focus on exam kits with solutions. Then when we teach MTQs, we normally suggest student to use the rule of elimination. Like if you are given with 4 options, so normally 2 options are not the options at all. So first of all, try to eliminate those options, okay? And then you have to concentrate on the best. So again, you have to read the requirement verb carefully, like it is written which one of these is not, which one of these is least, which one of these is the most. So I think you have to concentrate on the requirement verb quite effectively. So this is all from my side. With respect to the technical part, let's give 2 to 3 minutes on this, how to win the marker. So you have to facilitate the marker, who's going to mark your exam. So normally in the paper audit and assurance, the best way is to be specific, use golden words. The key, like sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. This is a very common word you should be using. Audit risk is the risk that the auditor will give an inappropriate opinion. So it's a golden word. Sampling risk is the risk that the conclusion based on the sample will be entirely different if the whole population is subject to same procedures. So my message to all the students with respect to winning the marker is that you should use golden words, which are very much there. For that you have to memorize them. Like if it is asked that what is your responsibility with respect to subsequent events. So you should be very clear that the auditor should apply procedures for the identification of subsequent events from the date of financial period end up to the date of auditor's report. And there is no active or formal responsibility for the application of procedures after the date of auditor's report. So try to use golden words. Try to, if it is defined, try to define it. Do not try to explain it. Your answer should be requirement specific. You have to read the requirement verb. If it is defined, kindly define. If it is explained, kindly explain. If it is identify and explain, first identify, then explain. And I think you should not be overwriting. This is again a very common error, that if you try to impress the marker by overwriting irrelevant stuff, I think it will not work. So you have to be very specific. And facilitating the marker is that you should write the answer which is required. You should not write the answer which you are knowing. So normally students try to write what they have with them. They are not writing what is being required by the examiner. So you have to make sure that you write whatever is required, and you have to facilitate the marker for that matter. So I thank you very much, all of you, for sparing time and watching this particular video. And my special thanks for the team of Synergic who made it possible to record this particular session. I can be reached at my email, my telephone, and you can visit our website as well. So thank you very much. Stay happy and stay safe. Good luck.